Joining me today is an American man by the name of Gary Hughes. This is Gary Hughes.
Hi, I'm mostly American. I was actually born in England. Did you know that?
Actually, I did know
It's not
that. What
important. Don't
part
worry
of
about what
England?
part. No, doesn't
No,
matter what
tell
part.
us what
No,
part
but
of England.
it doesn't matter.
Of
Doesn't
course it
matter.
matters what part of England. Well, we're not going forward. We're not talking about your images or promoting any of your businesses until you tell us what part of England you're from.
I have a joke about the English. It's that whenever one Englishman says to another Englishman where they're from, they always go, shame. Everyone in England hates every other town in England and probably also their own town. I've never experienced anything like it where in America, people are usually so proud of where they're from. They're like, I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. And like, I'm from Houston, Texas. And I'm from New York, like people are like Long Island, yeah, New Jersey. Like people are really proud of where they're from here. And in England, it's just not like maybe some people are, but it seems to me that like it's just the dumb thing is just to just talk crap about every other city. I was actually born in Wolverhampton, as Americans would say. And yeah, my family moved to the States when I was 2. And so I grew up here, although I'm still a citizen of the UK. I have this killer American accent, which no one cares about here, but seems to go over pretty well whenever I'm in England for some reason. I have no idea why.
So you're an immigrant.
I am an immigrant. Yes, first generation immigrant. That's me. But I'm passing as American because of how I sound. If you really take a look at my crooked teeth and my weak chin and my general sort of
Wow. Wow.
how do I insult
Wow.
myself and an entire nation at the same time?
Fair play. I respect it.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are the similarities? If you could say there was one, what are the similarities between Wolverhampton and Orlando?
Oh, well, they're both steeped in hundreds of years of tradition. Both incredibly notable architecture. Um, Millions of people flock to both cities equally each year for the sunshine and for all of the delights and pleasures available therein. I mean, I think they're pretty much the same city.
Fantastic. And for people
Yeah.
who don't know who you are, there won't be many of them, Gary. For people who don't know who you are, what sort of things do you do within the world of photography?
Okay, we have what we call my wife and I, my business partner. She's over here. You can't see, actually. There she is. It's like she's
Okay,
working.
go on.
Hi. This. We're in the
Hey,
studio now. We started this business 15 years ago, 2008, and so we did a little bit of everything. We were sort of what you call a full service studio. So we do weddings and portraits and babies and buckets and dragging couches into fields to photograph families and all the things that we do to make ends meet. But over the course of several years, we eventually started to specialize because of the rise of social media and the need for people to have high quality professional images of themselves for commerce. We really started doing a lot of headshots, and that sort of parlayed into an entire studio of what we call a commercial portrait studio. So I take pictures mostly of people for their jobs. And so I've done everything from dog headshots for dogs who act to to pictures of models, actors, entertainers, CEOs, influencers, consultants, authors. But every picture we take is for commercial purposes. I think most people, if you've seen me or talk anywhere, or you know my work, I think most people would consider me like a headshot photographer. But we call it a commercial portrait studio, and we definitely specialize in headshots. I shoot about 5 to 7,000 headshots a year, mostly at events. It's kind of a volume gig, and yeah, so the vast majority of what I do is not terribly interesting to most photographers, but it pays well. So
that high volume at conventions, you have to be quite a people person.
yeah, I would say it's way more important to to be good with people than it is to be good at photography in those situations. Essentially, most people are in front of the camera for 90 seconds to 2 minutes tops. I mean, their entire experience from signing in to having their photo taken to receiving their images on their phone instantly, and the whole thing is over is about 3 minutes. And so you have to be able to see someone, size them up, decide how you want to pose them, figure out how to decode and disarm them in a way to get a great expression. And you have to do it really, really fast. I like to say that plenty of people shoot better than me. Plenty of people shoot faster than me, but almost nobody shoots better than me and faster than me at the same time. That's a really stupid, super specific skill set, but I'm really good at shooting people well quickly.
Sounds great. I can't wait to transcribe that comment into captions.
Great, good.
You've joined us today on our series, My Favorite 10, which is where I ask respected photographers throughout the industry for their own favorite 10 images. And we talk about them because I enjoy doing a deep dive behind the image and not just seeing an image and applauding it for how brilliant it is. I like to know the motivation behind the images and the stories behind the images. People love stories. So we're going to start off here with image number one. So image number one here, location portrait. Talk to me through this one.
Sure. You said your 10 favorite, and I shoot so much volume that I don't know that I could possibly, but I picked 10 that had significance. I guess I hope that makes sense. So this has two different interesting pieces of significance. The first is that this is Naomi. She's actually also British, I think from Newcastle, and she is an actor and a model here in the States. And so she's been my client for years. And one of the things I try to tell people when I'm teaching is not all the good ideas have to be yours as the photographer. Sometimes being a good creative person is to take input and then mold it into something, to collaborate. And she is a person that consistently challenges me to do things that make me uncomfortable, not like in a bad way, just like, hey, let's do one more shot, or what if we did this? And it's supremely annoying, but the results are always great. So I'm sort of a set in my ways type of guy, and she always consistently kicks me in the butt and makes me try harder to deliver images for her. She always wants every shoot to be like better and more interesting than the last one. And so for this shoot, this is when she was the week before she was moving to LA, which is where she is now. And if you and she's like, I want to run around town and do a bunch of cool pictures in these outfits that I picked out. And I'm like, if you know me, I hate that. In Florida, it's impossibly hot. It's humid. It rains every afternoon. And this is a nightmare session for me. I like being in my cozy little studio with all my little lights and everything that I'm really comfortable with. And I used to shoot when we were new, like we all do. You shoot whatever you can, whatever you can find, wherever you can find to shoot. Nobody has a studio when they first start out, right? I've just gotten really comfortable where I'm at. So she pushed me to go running around town with her and to flex these muscles that I hadn't used in literally years. And I had an absolute blast doing it. I did some things that I never do. Is I shot outside on location. We just dive bombed places and just said, hey, can we set up and shoot here? This is a local skate park in Orlando. I shot a lot of portraits with a wide angle lens with my 15 to 35, which I never do. And so, we did a whole lot of things to push me out of my comfort zone. And I was wiped because it was about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, like 39 Celsius or something like that. It was very, very hot. It was humid. I was soaked through. And there she is in a sport coat and leather pants, and she isn't complaining, And so I just really love this image because it sort of represents this really fun shoot with a really dynamic person who really pushes me. And I got to flex these muscles that I didn't remember how to use that well, and I think I did a good job on it. And so it was really nice. So this sort of represents every once in a while you just got to get uncomfortable with your creation, with your image making, and just to do something that you don't like, and the results can be great. So it just looks very different than anything in my current portfolio. My old portfolio, all I did was shoot on location. We used to, guerrilla go around downtown Orlando and everywhere else and just try to not get kicked out of places. And that was how most people seem to start. And so this is just a really great shot with someone I really admire, and a really challenging situation. It was 1:00 in the afternoon. You can see in the full sun. As far as degree of difficulty of getting this shot, and this shot is, I would say, 99% in camera. I think I'd added a little bit of a color grade to it, which is turned the shadows a bit blue, which I like. And so you're talking about a person with a white shirt on, a black outfit, black leather pants, in bright sun, the difference in dynamic range between the highlight and the shadow. So like, you really have to know what you're doing to nail this shot and preserve all the pixels. Every pixel is in those shoes. Every pixel is in that shirt. Every pixel is in every part of this image. And that's not easy to do. And so I just am really proud of how this turned out, because I was grumpy. She had to drag me grumbling through the entire shoot, and it went well, and I'm happy with it.
So challenging technically and challenging creatively. And I think what you mentioned there about especially challenging yourself creatively, but working in collaboration with someone who's pushing you further. Because as a photographer, we tend to have all of these grand ideas about what we want to do, what we want to aspire to do. And I'm often within myself, I keep myself to think, well, maybe my subject doesn't want to push themselves that far. They'll think that idea is silly or that idea is stupid, and they won't want to do these things. And it's just so liberating when you work with someone who's just like, yeah, not only do I want to do that, but I want to do that times 100. I want to take it this much further. And that just pushes your own creativity even further,
and
right?
we get precious as photographers about we have to be the creative ones, and it has to be our idea and our concept and stuff like that. And I don't believe that's true at all. I think some of the best things are recognizing something good when it's happening and going with it. There's just as much creativity and collaboration as there is in coming up with all of it yourself. And did you hand paint the background you're shooting on? No. So shut up. Like you didn't do that. Like, so did you design the lens that you're shooting with in some artisanal workshop? No. There's collaboration of a million people every time you push the shutter. A million photographers who came before you, a million engineers and scientists and chemists. And so, like, let the person that you're photographing have a say in what's going on. And sometimes those ideas are great because it's not something that you would have thought of because your brain doesn't work the same. So take the ego out of creation. And that's what she always does for me. And that's one of the reasons I love her so much.
Fantastic. Moving on to image number 2. Hey, here we go. We were joking about this before. Let's not joke about this now. This is a really, really lovely family image. Talk to me about this.
This is photographing my wife and my 3 girls. And it's not my style, really. It's not my genre, really. But I think it all really works well. And this is one that hangs in our house. This is when we have a Christmas ornament of this. This is one of the most precious images. Probably my favorite image I've ever taken. And I love the connection, the hands. I even love my daughter, Josie, her little diaper sticking out of her pants. Like, I just love all that realness to it. And if you know my wife at all, Julie, that is like her smile. That is a real, not a camera smile. She's covered in babies and she loves it. This is like her purpose in life. Her ultimate form is to be the world's greatest mom. And so I think technically speaking, I think it's a fine image. I think that you could find 1,000 images just like it with a Google search, but this one is really special to me because this also came at a time in my life when our business was cranking, but I was doing most of the work myself. My wife is a homemaker and she had stepped back from the business. My studio manager had quit, 6 months before, and I was carrying everything, pretty much myself in the business. And I was falling apart, like legitimate panic attacks and trips to the ER. And like, I was falling apart. And then at that time, my wife was like, by the way, I'm also pregnant with our 3rd child. And we just laughed. I just laughed hysterically sitting on the floor in the nursery with her. And when Charlie, my 3rd, came along, my little girl, Charlie, when she was born and what she brought to our family, she's so kind and sweet, and she just is such a peacemaker, and she always gravitates to the person who's hurting instinctively. She was the first one of my kids. She's 2 years old. She's at the dinner table and she asks me how my day was. Like, she's so empathetic. And so this is sort of like when our family grew by one. This kind of represents this sort of beginning of me healing from all of that emotional trauma that I was going through, and that she was such a big part of that. So I love that this is sort of the beginning of that process. And that's why I think this image is so precious to me.
I love the imperfections in it, which you point out. I love the fact that it reminds you of that time in your life where, and I've said it on a previous video, where you find out that as a couple you're pregnant and it's never a good time. And I remember being told when we fell pregnant with our first, I remember my father-in-law, I'll tell the story again, but my father-in-law took me to one side and said, well, when would be a good time, James? Because it's never a great time, And I love
find the money, you make the time, you make it work.
And I think there's 2 things that really endear me to this image. One is the little ruffled hair just up here on the shoulder. I just love the little bit of chaos there. It's just perfect. But also the fact that I remember day one of working in a studio in 2003, my first photo studio job, and the manager after the first shoot I sat in on, and I wasn't even allowed to hold the camera. To me, he said, "I've been in this business 30 years. And if there's one thing I can teach you and one thing you can learn from this industry, is that parents will buy images of their children looking at the camera smiling."
Yeah.
And that still hasn't changed 20 years down the line.
It's the same. If you shoot weddings, it's the same. The pictures that when we shot weddings years ago, all the reprints that were ordered were the family formals, just people smiling, looking at the camera, and the table shots, people leaning in and smiling. Look at that. Those are the ones that people want. Like all those really cool artistic images are great, but nobody's buying those from you. Like this is this is history. And I love that it's kind of classic and timeless in its way and sort of perfectly imperfect. And it just speaks to me very much about a really cool time in my life.
It's stunning. It's stunning. Okay, moving on to the next. I was so struck with the simplicity of the pose, but most importantly, the piercing eyes, like chips of ice. It's stunning. Talk to me on this absolutely stunning portrait. Just talk to me on this.
Yeah, this is Ken. Ken is a choreographer, and a lot of my clients come from the entertainment industry: actors, models, choreographers, directors. And these are my favorite people to work with. And just like we talked about, one of those people who's kind of up for anything, he has kind of got this. You can see he's got a great jawline, great features, beautiful eyes. His eyebrows just need their own museum. They're just incredible, And he is just sort of like a lithe and lanky. Look, if you saw him, you'd be like, "I'll give you 3 guesses what he does for a living," and you'd go dancer. Like he looks like a dancer, and he is just the sweetest, most kind, quiet man. I'm sure like when he's running a show and doing the choreography, he might just be, a dictator. I don't know. But he's just one of those people who was like, he wanted to create something interesting. He came in for a headshot for his LinkedIn. And so what I typically do in those situations is I take a client and I do the standard thing. I shoot the commission. And then I try to do that first and quickly. And then I'm sort of like, okay, so would you like to do something more interesting? Would you like to do something else? And they're like, yeah, because I can do a bog standard headshot in 5 minutes and then have them on their way. And I could be like, yep, you got what you came for. But there's something about him and his willingness to create with me. And I think that impact doesn't always come from these crazy elements and building giant angel wings and all the things all the pressure we put on ourselves to create interesting images. This one is such like it draws you in with the eyes, and then there's a slow burn as you make your way around the expression. Also kind of a technically difficult image because he's got light hair, he's fair, and he's got this black ribbed turtleneck, which is sort of like, this is a very tough exposure to get this. And again, this is one of those images that's 99% in camera. I think I probably added a little tonal contrast to it, but like it's just you can't give somebody charisma. You could get close, but this guy just has it. And so one of my favorite techniques, and you'll see this again in another image, I like to shoot low. And the modern convention of people, especially when you're new, is to shoot down on them because they think it's slimming and because it's that selfie angle. And there's a place for that. I'm not saying that there isn't, but I like to give people power and intrigue. And so I'm very largely, this is shot at 135 millimeters, and I'm about 8 inches below his nose, shooting slightly up at an angle. And I just love the presence that a slightly low angle gives. And then when I'm shooting with this lighting, and this is because his head is turned, it's not quite, paramount lighting or butterfly lighting or beauty lighting, but the light is dead center to his chest. And I had him turn his head off a little ways. So one of the things I like to do is have people lift their chin up a little bit, and then the light really just fills their eyes up. And you get a little bit more, I don't know, there's just something to that slightly up. It's standoffish. It can be inquisitive. There's just a little bit of like power in that slight move. And I'm talking about raising that chin just a few centimeters up into the light and shooting at a slightly low angle, which is something that most photographers, especially if you're a trained portraitist, would never do. You're always like chin out and down, or shooting at a higher angle. And this is something that slightly breaks the rules. And I think that it's, besides his looks, it's that angle and that position that make this more intriguing. If I was shooting 6 inches above him down, it makes him smaller, makes him less interesting.
Mm.
In this case, he looks powerful and sexy and intriguing, and there's something, so his natural look. And so this one always reminds me not to use the same format on every person, that breaking the rules is a really good thing to do, but especially when you know what rules you're breaking and why. So the rules are there. And I think there's a strong gatekeeping culture in photography. When people start posting images, it's like, well, you got too many catch lights and blah, you're using the wrong lighting pattern or whatever. This reminds me, this isn't what a judge would probably call an imperfect lighting pattern. It's not loop, it's not open loop, it's not Rembrandt, it's not Paramount lighting. It's just a little bit of a mess. A stingy judge might say, well, if his nose was turned slightly to his left, you'd get that pattern. No, but it's just that breaking the rules sometimes gives you much better results. But when you do it on purpose because you know what the rules are, it always works. And so I love that. And Ken, this picture, Ken always reminds me that you can shoot up somebody's nose and have it look pretty kick-ass. So don't listen to all the gatekeepers and the people that are trying to tell you that things have to be done a certain way. Rigidity kills ingenuity and creativity.
Really does. That's getting captioned. Or gatekeepers, as you put it, will say, oh, that's bad posing, or that's bad lighting. And there's certain ways that a light falls on a face that can flatter things or that can accentuate things. Doesn't mean that it was bad. It just means that it was used in a way that created an effect. It was just a cause and an effect. What you've got here, which is, I think, is so endearing, which is what you allude to with the camera angle and the camera position, is a student-teacher relationship. And he's quite clearly the master, quite clearly the choreographer, quite clearly the guy that tells all the other dancers what to do through his experience and through his intelligence and through his wealth of knowledge. And that just comes across so well in what is a really simple portrait, but overwhelmingly timeless. Just could have come from any era,
That's kind of where I've settled over the years is my two favorite portrait photographers, one classic and one modern, is my classic favorite is Yusuf Karsh. If I could just get a little bit of that, and his energy, his charisma, his creativity. If you read books about him interacting with people, he's just like, he just got people and he just saw something in them and he knew how to turn it into a brilliant portrait. And my modern favorite portrait photographer is Sam Jones. Devastatingly simple work. He's photographed every celebrity you've ever heard of. In fact, he's a director as well. If you have, they just released a new documentary about Tony Hawk. If you haven't seen that, he directed that. And just an incredible creative. And I've got a whole book signed by him of his portraits that is like my Bible, because it's just, everything's on white or on black or on gray, and everybody's dressed simply, and he just creates character portraits with just the bare minimum that are so impactful. And so that's kind of what I aim to do, is to, when I approach a person in the studio, my goal is to treat them as if I was hired by their talent agency to photograph them for the cover of a magazine. And I don't always hit that mark, but if I treat everybody like they're getting an editorial in Vanity Fair, like, it's just better for everybody. So I do the LinkedIn headshot, and then I try to do something that looks like, I want them to look like they're way more successful and rich than they really are. I want them to have an iconic image of themselves. My goal is to shoot that casket portrait, the one that goes on their casket when they're dead. I want it to be the single most interesting portrait of them they've ever had, so much so that their loved ones have to print it and put it on their casket when they die.
With not wishing to get morbid, I'm sure you've experienced this, because I have, having been a family photographer for 20 years. When you get the unfortunate and the very, very sad email through from a previous client that someone that you photographed in the past has passed, and they ask you for a digital file from one of their shoots because they've lost all of theirs. And I always keep mine anyway. It's one of the greatest privileges, I think, that you can have, that out of all of the photographs in their entire life, they come back to you for the one that they feel best represents them. And I think that's a huge privilege.
That's what I mean. It's like, even when you're doing something that seems standard, I think we have a tremendous responsibility as image makers, even if just so that we know we're doing the right thing, to create something that's useful and timeless. And when you're taking a picture of someone, or let's say a wedding, for example, you're not really photographing it for the couple. You know what I mean? You're really photographing it for their future generations. We're in a way, there's a part of our job, even if you do stuff that you feel is fairly standard, we're sort of visual historians. And I know that might be, puffing up a little bit too much, but when you've been in business long enough to get those emails, to get those phone calls, that hits hard. And I take that seriously. So that's why I try to be meticulous in everything that I do. And I don't want somebody to look at the picture and be like, that was clearly taken in the 1999 when Lucis art filter was really big and everything's overly crunchy. I just want it to be, I want it to be able to print, and I want it to be able to be timeless as much as I can.
Yeah. Lovely. Perfect. Moving on. Image number 4 here. We have a wedding image. Talk me through this amazing location.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a portrait of the bride and groom from my very last wedding I ever shot. And so, if you know me at all, and my parents were wedding and portrait photographers. They're retired now. They're not dead. When I say were, they're just retired. And they had a studio. My dad was a photographer for 40 years. And my first wedding, I was 10. And I had to go with my dad on a wedding and carry his bags, and I got paid $5 for that. I think that's illegal, but anyway, I got $5 was a lot to me at the time. That was a whole X-Men action figure at the time in like 1992. So I was into
X-Men?
it. Oh, it's a B-side, man. My favorite X-Men action figure was Bishop. I just thought he was the coolest figure. I like the character design for Bishop. He's a B character at best, but but I also had Wolverine, Magneto. Nobody had Cyclops. Nobody who wants Cyclops. Cyclops is the least cool of the X-Men.
Cyclops is like the prefect at school that no one likes.
Yeah. He's awful. Yeah.
Not even the teachers like him.
No, none of the teachers like him. No. He's like that kid Percy from the Harry Potter movies. He's like, yeah, okay, I get it. You get straight A's. You're going somewhere, but we all hate you. Anyway, this image was taken, and this has a cool kind of connection. The bride actually used to work for the WWE. We ended up shooting her wedding, and they're big Universal Studios fans. So we actually got to get in early to Universal Studios before the park opened. We did their whole engagement session inside. I got a whole slew of incredible images. Like, we were the only ones on the Hogwarts Express, and we got to do all the cool stuff at Universal, and it was just their bridal party. It was so rad. So wow. This was at a Universal hotel. I forget which one, but the whole style of the hotel is like mid-century modern, and with like a dash of like Art Deco. It kind of looks like the Jetsons a little bit more than, or actually it's a little more like the Incredibles. That's if you think of that production design. But then you go down this hallway, and then there's this 3-story that looks like you fell down a weird medieval well, and it's just sitting in the middle of the hotel. And so I thought that this would be a really cool place for a portrait. So, I did the standard stuff, and we went down to the bottom, put all the bridal party on those barrels, and I shot through the door that you can see behind the bride there. And we did all this stuff. And then I was like, we got to capture this room. And in a portrait, you're very often, we just put them in front of something interesting and take their picture, and then we light it and we make it nice, and it's fine. But this was, I was learning a lot at the time still about creating interesting portraits. And one of the things that we often fail to do is, one, we fail to consider what's capable with technology, and we also fail to consider how much depth creates in a portrait. And I'm very guilty of shooting in a very two-dimensional way. I always feel like my work can just get flat when I'm not inspired. And so I wanted something with depth. And so foreground, subject, background, and as much depth as possible. So this is actually 2 images. So I had an assistant up on the top left of the stairs and an assistant under the right. And one was shooting a speed light at the bride, and the other one up at the top was shooting a speed light down at the groom. So I fired 2 images, one without an assistant in each spot, and then they ended up being layered into one image. So I didn't move my position. I didn't move the bride and groom. 1 shot, 2 shot, and then I just rubbed through the layers and got the assistants out of the images. And that's where we came here. And I figured this is probably the coolest first look shot I've ever taken. I wanted it to feel like a first look, like she comes out to the grand staircase and there he is waiting for her. And so this one, I ended up putting this into PPA's International Photographic Competition. It scored a 98. It was the highest scoring image I've ever put in. And it was the last image I ever submitted from a wedding that I shot. And so this was sort of like a really cool capstone on my career as a wedding photographer, to say, like, you did it, you figured it out, you're a good wedding photographer. Right. And this is a good way to say goodbye to wedding photography. And to tie it back into the family image, when my oldest was born, or when my wife told me she was pregnant with our first, I realized I had to get out of the wedding business, because it's all nights and weekends, engagement sessions, meetings, sales sessions, IPS, weddings every weekend. And I grew up that way, and I'm really proud of my parents for the way that they supported us with their business. But I didn't want to not be there for school plays. I didn't want to not be there for camping and Cub Scouts and whatever else you can do. And so one of the things that started the transition to a commercial portrait studio was brought on by wanting to be basically a 9-to-5 business. And so this was sort of saying goodbye to my career as a wedding photographer. And it was the best wedding image I ever took.
It's almost like saying I completed wedding photography, full completion.
It was a golden ticket wedding. Great looking couple. They had the money and the means and the desire to give. They gave us hours of portraits, both before the wedding and during the wedding. They're just like, we want the pictures to be great. We'll give you as much time as you want. They had everything was fabulously appointed. Like, it's just one of those weddings that when you start your career and you're shooting a wedding in a backyard, with like 10 people, and the bride and groom are just normal looking folks with a cheap dress, and the guy's wearing a kilt for some reason. I don't know why people do that, but like, this was all the tumblers lined into place for me to be able to take advantage of this and grab this image. And so everything about it works, and I just love it so much.
It's great. It's wonderful. It really is. So the guys that are holding the flashlights, are they shopped out of this image?
Well,
it's hiding in nooks.
Well, right under the groom's feet is where one is actually, now that I think about it, it was the same assistant, my dear friend Savannah Butler, and she was with us on this wedding. So she walked up to the top, lit the groom, walked around to the bottom, lit the bride. So I just had two images, and the image was shot on a tripod. And so I just layered the images over top of each other and rubbed through the places where she was in each photo, and then that gave us the completed image. So I intended to shoot it that way, which is what I talk about, what's popular with technology. And I was at a workshop one day, and the instructor was years before this, and the instructor was showing images before and after, like what it started with. And so, one shot, he was like out on an incredibly bright day. He only had a small strobe handy, and he needed to light the couple and overpower the sun, and he couldn't do it while getting this big vista. So he just had his assistant with the light on a stick, literally 3 feet away from the couple. So he took one with the light and then one without the light, and he just rubbed through where the assistant was. And I was like, oh, because I wasn't fixing anything in Photoshop. That was an intentional decision that I made, knowing what was possible. I said, well, if I just do this, I've got two exposures combined into one. And incidentally, this was my very first silver award at WPPI. So this is the first image I entered in WPPI that got an award as well. So like, this one has a lot of significance for me.
Speaking of that, I mean, you'll know that in wedding categories, they are often overwhelmed with intricate staircases and architecture and interior design.
Oh, I know how cliche it is. Yes.
but without the storytelling element of a wedding. Right. Whereas this has that, because you can see they're literally looking at each other in the photo. They're literally they're the stars of the show. The relationship is told. And everything is working. Everything feels like it's working around them. Whereas sometimes in these images that are entered, the bride and groom, or sometimes just the bride alone or the groom alone, can feel a bit like an afterthought. The story, the narrative isn't there,
Yeah, I felt like this one would flow into an album as a piece of the story. I wanted it. I think the difference between good photography and great photography is when it says something about the people in it, not just a capture of like anybody can learn lighting, anybody can learn posing. The next elements for me, you learn to use your camera. Okay, then you learn to find natural light. Then you learn to use strobes to augment that natural light. And then maybe, you learn to pose, Okay, so then now you've got lighting, posing, and technical pretty well covered. then the advanced technique comes in color theory and storytelling. And that's what takes you from a good photographer to a great photographer. And then you get to play with it. Like, it's like you can't learn to pop a wheelie or to take a ramp until you learn how to ride the bike. So I get that. But like, some people like to start high concept, but they don't have the chops to make it happen. And so I always say, like, an image, the difference really between a good photographer and a great photographer is intent. You do everything on purpose. And having an idea, you should know what the image looks like in your head before you push the shutter. If you take a picture and you're surprised by the results, you're not there yet. You will be, but you got to go back to fundamentals. You shouldn't be surprised by what you see on the screen. You should never be surprised. This is one of my very favorite portraits, and it's a good segue because this one has a lot of intent in it. This is Dennis. He's a magician. If you follow him by, I think he's on Instagram. He's got a great Instagram where he does magic tricks on Instagram, and it blows your mind. Like, how did you pick my card? I'm watching this video. I don't understand. But anyway, so he has a great career as an actor and as a magician. And so there's a lot in here that is specifically him. He wears a tuxedo, but he always wears those Adidas. That's kind of his trademark, is to have those. So we wanted to do that. I also feel like I wanted to do kind of an homage to two different things. And there's a very famous portrait of Harry Houdini, who's in a very similar pose to this, hands in pockets. And so sometimes if I'm looking for a way to make a shot more interesting, I'll create like a Pinterest board and I'll put a bunch of photos in it. So I was looking around for photos of magicians. And obviously I look for portraits of Houdini because he's the magician's magician, right? He's sort of like the Michael Jordan of magicians. And so yeah, you can put that as a caption, the Michael Jordan. And then I also noticed that Dennis, if you look at him, he looks quite a bit like a young Sean Connery. I always felt like he's got those vibes, you know. He's just kind of got that old school movie star kind of a look to him. He's got like the chiseled jaw, cheekbones, the big head, and the slick black hair. You know, he's just got that Cary Grant, Clark Gable, Sean Connery, old movie star kind of a look. There is a very famous portrait of Sean Connery when he was doing Bond in the early days, and he's on on the
side of the car.
Yeah. And that's where I got the pose from too. So him and Houdini, Sean Connery and Houdini, had a pose where they were both had portraits where they were posed this same way. And so I just sort of lined that up in my head. And then this also represents a very difficult shot technically to maintain the detail in the shadows. And this is probably, I like portraits with a lot of lights that look like it could be just a big window. And this is 7 lights. And so this is a 7 light portrait that you probably wouldn't be able to tell. And that's what I like. So my very first instructor, the late great Frank Cricchio, and Frank Cricchio, if you ever look him up, he invented half the stuff we do in modern portrait photography. He's just one of the all-time greats. It was my very first photography training, was a week with Frank Cricchio. And he did a trick where he used like 9 lights to take a picture. And he showed you, like, one of them was just to highlight the nose. Like, this guy technically was amazing. And he said something that I've never forgotten. He said, a good photographer can make 1 light look like 10 and 10 lights look like 1. And I'm like, damn. Yeah. So this is a really great example of one of my evolution as a studio portraitist, which is to subtlety in my lighting. And this is very subtle, and I love it when you look at an image and you could sit there and you could guess how I lit it, and you probably wouldn't be able to figure out all of it. And that's what I really like. I want to, if you can, an experienced photographer looks at an image, be like, I know how to do that. And I know exactly how they accomplished that. But this one, you might get half of it, but there's just 7 lights in this image. And so, like, I like that. I like that 7 lights can look like it could possibly just be a big window. And so I love the character. Dennis is a fantastic client. He's very talented, obviously great looking guy, and he's willing to let me play, and all the tones are here, and the expression is great. Like, he's just such a great subject. And I love that I was able to, he gave me the space and the time to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes just setting this one picture up.
Yeah, it's a stunning shot, and I'm going to spend the rest of the day trying to work out how you lit it. Thanks. Next shot.
Oh man, you want to talk about clients who you love? This is Halia, and she is Polynesian. I think she's from Hawaii, and she is a, believe it or not, she's a model. Funny enough, but this is a really interesting image because this represents something that wasn't commissioned. I very rarely shoot uncommissioned work. I photographed her headshots and some modeling portfolio stuff for her before, and she works for one of the great entertainment companies, and they fly her all around because she sings, she dances, she does like hula stuff and fire sticks, and she can do anything, and she's a terrific dancer of all different styles of dance, and so they just move her all over the place. This one company to just where they need somebody that could do everything, they put Halia, and so most of what I've done for her is pretty standard, headshot actor model portfolio stuff. And so one of the things we do is I like to follow my clients on Instagram. They follow us back. And then I like to sort of interact with their brand and support their efforts by, encouraging them and leaving comments and sharing their content. Halia was in the Caribbean, and she was at some kind of festival. I forget. There's a big one, and it's just slipped my mind. But there's a big festival. Everybody dresses bonkers. It's kind of like Mardi Gras, but the Caribbean's version. Somebody's going to be screaming it at the screen, and I'll think of it at 2 a.m. So it's just her and a bunch of her friends in these crazy outfits, and just iPhone video of them just marching. Festival, carnival. That was it. Carnival.
Yep.
And so I immediately messaged her because this outfit was so great, and I messaged her and said, "Halia, are you bringing that back to the States when you come?" And she goes, "Yeah." I go, "Do you want to come in the studio and get like a cool portrait of it?" And this is her exact response. She goes, "Yes, but do you have any swords?" Like, does it get better than yes, do you have any swords? So I have a sword guy, funny enough, my buddy EJ, and he's got a whole sword collection, and he does a lot with different Renaissance fairs and stuff. And so I basically drove out to where he's working. He's a karaoke host. And so I drove out to where he was working one night. And he had brought these swords in his trunk. And so it was the middle of the night. He's working at this karaoke bar. And then I went to his car, and he sort of handed me this big rolled up bundle of swords that we transferred from one trunk to the other. It looked like this very nefarious kind of transaction. And anyway, so we photographed Halia in the studio with swords. And this is an image that I've entered in a bunch of different competitions, and it's done pretty well for me. I think this one scored a 96 at the PPA's International Photographic Competition, and I just love her. She's great. She's down for anything, and she's obviously a great subject. And I just enjoyed, taking this carnival festival outfit and turning it into like a warrior princess. I just thought that was kind of cool. One of my few forays into shooting for fun.
Let's talk about your next image.
Oh man. Okay, so this is it represents a couple of things. This is an interesting turning point in my career, and I think that as a business owner, it's important to remember that you have to pay attention to what you're being asked to do. Like if you get asked to do a thing by clients enough times, then you're witnessing a trend. And instead of saying no to it, you should sort of embrace it. And it's basically, he's a high level executive in a particular field, but he's moving into being a consultant and kind of setting up business for himself as a speaker, as a presenter. And so this is where I started to hone in on the idea that people move from needing a headshot to needing like an iconic cover of Forbes magazine kind of a portrait. And so this is where the first bell rung. It's like, I need to market to this. I need to market to more than just I'm doing a LinkedIn headshot. I'm going to create iconic imagery for their next stage of your career. People will spend a lot of money to look like they make a lot of money and they're important. And so this guy was incredible to work with. Just one of those clients you come in, and a lot of people at his level, they come in and they go, let's go. And he just gave me time, and he was just so gracious.
So rare. That's so rare.
Isn't that rare?
I give you time, right?
Yeah. He gave me all the time I wanted, and he was willing to try stuff. So what had happened was with this job is like the marketing company that he was working with, they said, we want portraits that look like this. And they sent me a whole PDF document, and it was all Platon. Like, and if you're not familiar with Platon, he's like very specific style, very iconic portrait. He's photographed everybody you've ever heard of, from George Clooney and Martin Scorsese to Muammar Gaddafi. Like, he's photographed like insane amounts of people, like he's just all of these incredibly powerful people in this very specific style. So I looked at it, and it's like somebody just sends you, like something that's beyond you and goes, I want you to do exactly what this guy who makes millions of dollars doing this thing to do. By the way, we're paying you $500 or whatever. Like, you like just the balls of a company to pick images from one of the world's most iconic living portraitists and just go to some guy in a small town in Florida and be like, can you do what this world famous guy can do? It would basically be like, hiring a chauffeur and being like, I want you to drive like Lewis Hamilton. He's like, dude, like that guy's been driving race cars his entire life. Like I can't, anyway.
Can
So
drive.
yeah, as long as it's automatic. So this is actually this was a challenge for me. At first I was intimidated because clients, there's a point in your career in the early days where everything you make, people come to you and tell you what to make for them. And then there's a time when your style develops, when you get a style of your own, that people start coming to you and saying, I want you to do, James, I want you to do your style. Just do it for me. And that is a huge tipping point as a creative, to go from, here's my Pinterest board, copy every shot on the Pinterest board, to, I love what you do. I've followed you for a long time and I'm so excited to work with you. Please just give me your stuff. And that's not only you do need to recognize that as a photographer, but you also need to monetize that as a business owner and start leaning into that. Like, what makes you different? What makes you special? The differentiator, the value proposition for your business. And your style is a big part of that. And so this not only represents a transition in how I approach my business, marketing to people who are starting to go from getting paid from what they do to getting paid for what they know. And that's where the real money happens for people in the corporate world, when they start getting paid for their knowledge instead of their labor. And so this guy was at that point in his career. And I think did a reasonable facsimile of Platon's style here. I wouldn't say that I nailed it, but I would say that I did a pretty good job giving them what they asked for, considering I'm not Platon.
It's so difficult to say that as a photographer as well, though, isn't it? It's so even for the word, I find it difficult for the words to come out. Oh, I did a good job of doing a ranking here. Like, it's just like, it's nowhere near, Right. But for the client, it means something different, right?
Hey, the Muggles loved it, so that's all. Like, the Wizards are probably skeptical. The Muggles were fine. That's what I call non-photographers. I call them Muggles. So, like, the Muggles thought it was exactly what they wanted. I can clearly see the minute differences in the style and the approach, but this is my attempt at a Platon. And I've got one that I like even better. I just couldn't find it for this, where his hands, just like Platon, they're like together like this in the center, and they're right up to the lens, and they're gigantic. And I entered that one in competition, and it tanked. They're like, the hands are just way out of proportion. I'm like, yeah, I know. I did that. That's clearly intentional. But whatever, you don't win every time you enter. But I just love this guy. He was wonderful to work with. I love the challenge, and I love what it represents as a turning point in my business, to go from, I'm going to be a LinkedIn headshot guy, to I'm going to create portraits for people who will value what I can do for them.
There's a couple of things that I want to touch on. Firstly, in terms of, like, you mentioned, like, the Pinterest board, and like going for clients and they give you a load of Pinterest images and you try and copy them. For anyone who's struggling to bridge that gap between your own, from that to get into people coming to you for your own style, if it's any consolation, we still use the Pinterest board with our client shoots. We just use it as a bridging point between us and the client, to say, this is the style and this is the direction we're going to go in, but we are going to use this as inspiration to create our own sets and do our own things, so that everyone's sort of on board at the time. There's still a place for that. Instead, it's a really useful collaborative tool for clients who aren't photographers.
I agree. And not only that, but I think that copying other styles and trying to replicate them is an incredibly powerful exercise for a photographer to learn. Like, style isn't just something that's inside you. Style is when you know how to do one thing only. Shooting wide open using only window light is not a style. That's the only thing you know how to do. Style is when you know how to do 50 things, but you consistently choose this one thing because it's the thing you like to do the best out of all the things you know how to do. That's a style. Style comes from a breadth of knowledge, not a lack of knowledge and experience. And so please copy those images. Every photographer has to go through the Pinterest board phase. Some of us still do it. I love it. When I'm shooting in a genre that's a little bit outside my wheelhouse, I always have a Pinterest board, always. And so like when a client says, I want you to do this, set those expectations, but why not try and copy Platon or Rankin or Yusuf Karsh or David LaChapelle? Why not give that a whirl? That's how you learn those techniques so that you can choose to use them again or not. Add to that Rolodex. Boy, that dates me, doesn't it? Add to that Rolodex of knowledge. So like, for example, if you're out in the bright sunshine at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I know that in England, you probably don't have that problem a lot, but like when you're out in the bright sunshine and the only thing you know how to do is to boom a flash at somebody, then that's your one technique. You need to know how to 5 different ways to solve that problem. And then the one that you gravitate to is your style.
That's right. And if you're interested, internet, in seeing someone do that, try and work out how to shoot, I don't know, something like famous album covers using all of the lights in their studio and try and recreate the lighting that was used to create these famous album covers, you can look at these videos here that are popping up right now.
Over there.
Over there somewhere, I don't know. And the second point I wanted to touch on was the fact that someone saw your portrait with the big hands and literally just went to their Rolodex of reasons to knock an image down and chose that one and decided to find 25 points from somewhere.
You got to think of image competition as it's always a roll of the dice because there's a human element. Your best hope is that somebody on the panel will get it. I call them the images where you're rolling the dice. You know you're putting in something that is off ideal, off standard. And when you do that, you have to know you're rolling the dice and you hope a judge. And if they don't, then listen to the critique, take what you can take, and then enter it again. Like just keep going. Like competition isn't the end all be all of learning how to be a great photographer, not even close, but it is a really fun game that can help you sharpen your skills and give you and it's something that can give you a lot of great input when creating images in the future.
Next, let's talk about Maxwell. This is in my wheelhouse, as you would say in America.
Well, the reason I put this one is it's recent. I actually took it last week, and I wouldn't call it one of my favorite 10 images. But I took this last week. This is just a straight black and white conversion out of camera. So I've done nothing to Maxwell here except crop it and turn it black and white. And there are a couple of things I really like about this. One is I am historically pretty terrible about figure studies and body shots and musculature. It's not, the people who do this and do this often, they know what muscles to tell people to flex and how to stand, and they know where to put the lights to make certain muscles look better. And I'm a portraitist, but this is a specialty that's not my specialty. So when I get asked to do this for my modeling clients, it always kind of scares me because I know that it's not my strongest area. And so this felt like a really good piece of progress for me in an area where I know that I'm weak. And so I feel like the client, for most of the time, if you're not really good at photographing figure studies and forms and musculature and anatomy, the reaction you'll get when your client sees the photos is inevitably like, where are my muscles? Or I look too fat, or like, I hate it. Like the people who are into bodybuilding, they know a lot about the human form. And so they are going to be really tough critics of your work if it isn't good. So this represents, this guy is a serious fitness guy, and he knows the names of all the muscles and all the things. And so this represents probably the first time ever I photographed an anatomical figure that I've done a body shot where the client was like, amazing, thank you, I love everything about this. And I was cringing, waiting for him to go like, where are my deltoids, or whatever they say, And so and it's also, this is a really simply lit portrait. To me, this is there's nothing fancy here. I've got 2 lights lighting a white wall, and then I've got 1 strobe with no modifier on it except for an aluminum cone, and I got it and so it's using harsh light to create interesting portraits. Like if you're in the portrait and wedding world, very often training is you got to make it soft, you got to make the transition gradual, and you got to do all these things. And so like I have lately, I've been doing a lot more just straight bare ball portraits to do interesting things with people. Obviously, you got to have the right subject matter and the right commission. But so this is always a little bit of a leap for me. And I feel like this doesn't represent necessarily world-class quality of the genre, but this represents a really solid step forward for me where I succeeded at something that I'm not good at. And that's kind of why I included this one.
That's really cool. So I think that's really cool that someone who's such an established photographer would put forward an image where they're saying, hey, like last week I tried something different and I know it's not perfect, but I'm really pleased.
I'm proud of my progress.
Worked. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And for me, it sort of recreates what you've done is you've used studio lighting to recreate what looks like a guy stood at high noon outside.
Yeah, that's exactly what I go for. Yeah.
Yeah, which is
my best technique for creating sunshine indoors on a sunny day is just to use I literally just hoist the strobe up. It's like 12 feet in the air, angled down about 35 degrees. And then you get in, and I was trying to get in the right spot to get that little triangle under his other eye too.
Yeah.
And I love that the eyes are in shadow because I'm not shooting for the eyes. You know, I'm shooting for the body. So I was able to light the face while complementing the body. And that is surprisingly difficult if you don't know how to do it and if you're not experienced at it, because portrait photographers were all about the face. And like, if you don't light the face and make the face is always the center of attention. And that's why this is such a different genre, is because the face isn't the center of attention. So this is a cool step forward for me in something that you're always learning, always growing, no matter how many people I photographed. And so it's a different genre of portraiture. And I'm just pretty pleased with my progress as I continue to move forward, getting better at this.
It's cool. I love it. Stay off my patch. Right, next.
No, none of my clients are going to hire you, and vice versa. Oh,
go for it.
Oh man,
Talk to me about a slice of America.
The Americana. This is a 1953 Chevy Bel Air, and this represents a random client that came from Google. There's a huge tool company in the United States, and they put out a calendar every year. This is a multi-million-dollar company, and they are massive. Everybody knows who they are here. And so they put out a car calendar every year. This is actually a pretty funny story. So they came down to the wire. So what they do is this tool company operates as a franchise. You buy a truck from them and stock it with tools, and you get to go run your own business and sell tools. Basically, you drive from mechanics to mechanic shop to mechanic shop, and you do tool delivery, and you let the mechanics buy the tools off your truck. And it's a really interesting business model. There are a few big companies that do that here. And so this company puts out a car calendar every year, and all the car calendars are cars that are owned by their franchisees. So basically, they all, thousands of people submit their cars for this calendar, and they just take a picture with their phone and be like, I have a 53 Chevy Bel Air. I'd love it to be included in the calendar. So the company picks 12 of their franchisees, and then they pay photographers to go and photograph the car. And so this is a couple of really cool things about this. One is I've never photographed a car before. This is the first car I ever photographed. Never done a job like this. But I answered the phone, and they're like, "Hey, this is so and so from such and such company. We need a car photograph for our calendar." And I was like, "Great, no problem. I'd love to do that." I was just say, "Please don't ask me for portfolio. Please don't ask me for portfolio." And they didn't. They didn't ask me for portfolio. So what I do is they paid me, and I was like, this is going to be really hard. I've never done it before. I'm just going to instead of going, I'm just going to do it for a small amount of money. I said, let's let the universe decide. I threw a stupid number at them, and they're like, yeah, no problem. Because they were over a barrel. They had this one, and so just let that be a lesson to you. You don't have to back off and go, I'll do it for $200. Like most of the photographers I know would have probably done this for free, just for the opportunity to do it. And so I just threw a stupid number at them. They said yes. And I actually have a whole YouTube video about this. Maybe I'll send you the link and you can put it in the description of this video. I have like a 20-minute YouTube video that shows this entire process and of how this happened. I don't have a place to photograph a car. I figured, let me do like a car catalog classic thing. And I rented a studio with some of the stupid money they gave me. And I rented a gigantic studio that you can drive a car into with a 40-foot cyc wall. And so I went and I got my friend Kevin to come with me and shoot video. And then I photographed it just the only way I knew how, I don't have enough lights to achieve this in camera. So I had like, I suspended two 60-inch umbrellas above the car. And then I had a flash inside the car. And then I had my assistant walk around and I took photographs. You could see the accent on the front bumper, on the rear tail, and on the wheels. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is probably 7 photographs. All the camera never moved, and it was just walking around with a speed light and lighting the different parts of the car, including the interior that was lit. And so it was, I've never done it before. I looked up a couple of things on YouTube to be like, what are the things that car guys look for, car photographers look for when they photograph it? So then there's, you want the shoulder accent light that goes along the hood all the way back to the tail. You want the light coming up from the bottom to create that dimension. You want the interior to be illuminated, and you want the front and the rear illuminated. I could have done this in camera if I'd had 12, 13 lights, but I don't even own that many lights. And so I was like, I did it the best way I knew how in my head, intent. I was like, I know what needs to be lit. I put all the lights in place that could be stationary, and then pop, 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 took 6 exposures, 7 exposures. And then this is the image that resulted from it. Now, the funny story is that I had never looked at this calendar before. They put this calendar out every year, and every single photo in the calendar is almost like a selfie or just a low energy, low effort professional picture. It's like the owner of the car with the car in the driveway of their house. And so this is the only image in the whole calendar that has this level of production. Like, nobody put anywhere near. I way overshot the mark on this. Like, I just took it way too seriously. And so this image has won awards in every competition I've put it into. And it's funny because it's so not my genre, but it represents, again, pushing myself to do something I've never done before, for using intent, for trying really hard to understand what I was doing, and for not being afraid to take a leap into something that I didn't know. But I took an intelligent leap. I did my homework, and except for looking at the calendar, apparently. And I ended up making this and a whole series of images of all the different details on the car. And the cool thing is, this guy and his dad built the car over the course of 6 years. They pulled the frame out of a scrapyard, and it's their thing that they do. It's their thing that they do together. They restore cars together. They grab they grab burnout frames out of scrapyards, and then they rebuild it with all the original parts that they can find. 6 years it took them because they used all original parts. And so this guy and his dad have built this incredible relationship around this car. And so part of, if you watch the video, spoiler alert, I took the images, 2 different images, one for him and one for his dad, and I printed them up large. And then I met the guy out on his delivery route, and I delivered the prints as gifts for him and his dad, no charge, because I just wanted him and his dad to both have this sort of piece of their history together. And so everything about this worked for me. I learned a ton. I had a great time doing it. And I got to be, really appreciative of the son and the dad and their relationship. And there's just I got to print, which was great. There's a lot in here that this image really means an awful lot to me. And on the surface, you may look at it like this is just a simple image of a car. It is, but if you don't know how to do this is really damn hard.
Yeah. Yeah, this is tricky. And like, it looks like one of the cars that Mr. Miyagi offers Daniel at the end of Karate Kid.
Yes, exactly. It is. There is a Bel Air in that scene. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really proud of this. I'm proud of the video. I'm proud of the photo. And I'm just excited that I accomplished something that scared the crap out of me when I got the call.
Fair play. I respect it. Next one here.
If I had to pick maybe my favorite image of all time, this would probably be it. This is live. She is a musician. She's a local musician. And this is so completely unaffected as an image. This is literally a black and white conversion, otherwise straight out of camera. And this image has won awards at a bunch of different competitions that I've entered it into. And it was also the cover of Professional Photographer magazine. So this is my first, photography magazine cover. And I have so much love for her. She's such an amazing person. And it's such a great talent, and always willing to work in the studio. And she's just an inspiring human being. And so Live has always had very, very long braids since I've known her. I've known Live 15 years now. She's been, we've worked with her a bunch of times. And we've done everything from promo photos. She's an ambassador for Shure microphones and equipment. And so we did a promo for Shure with her. We've done album cover photos with her, a bunch of stuff. And everything was complex except this. And so what had happened was, this was a week after she cut her hair off that she'd had her whole life. And so she'd had long hair her entire life. And she came in and she was like, I don't know, different. I can't explain it because I've never really had that experience, but she's just like, I want something that shows what I look like now, something that talks about my hair, about like the history, the baggage that I've just left behind, and there's just like power and history just leaving her body as she cut her hair off. And so I just wanted a very, very simple portrait. Again, this is a six light portrait that, legitimately probably could be done with a lot less effort, but I shot this this is shot at 90 millimeters with the Canon RP, which is their like baby camera. And I think I shot this at f8, if anybody's interested in those settings. I used the a white scrim as the background, and I shot a couple of lights through it to create those edge lights around the side. I feel like this is one of those ones that looks very simple when you first look at it and you're like, what's the big deal? But I think the more you get into it, the more powerful it gets. And it's because of her, because this expression is like what was in her heart and on her mind when she walked into my studio that day. So again, I wanted to give her power. I wanted to give her presence. And so I shot low, I shot up, I had her raise her chin into that light. And so that my direction was, I said, I want you to look over the top of my head, and I want you to think about what you've just been through. And I want you to relax your jaw, let your lips part, and I want you to breathe, and then out through your mouth. And that's when I took the picture, and that's what I got. And it was just it's a really great moment between her and I, showing, just us working well together, me making an effort to understand what she was going through, and then creating something kind of that I believe is iconic for her. I think that this marks a really important moment in her life, and just a great collaboration with a wonderful human being. And the funny part is, this was the cover of Professional Photographer magazine. That's PPA's magazine, and they have a convention issue. Their convention's in January, and this is the issue that all 10,000 people who come to the convention get handed as they walk in the door, and my image is on the cover. If you get the cover of PPA magazine, you want the January issue. This is just the best issue to land the cover of. So not only is it a headshot, not only is it a simple portrait on a white background, but it got on the cover of what I think is probably the best photography magazine in the United States. And so this is January of 2020. Follow me here. So I'm a platform presenter at Imaging USA. There are 900 people in the room where I'm speaking. I'm on the cover of the magazine. I'm speaking on the platform at this convention. Business is going great. We just finished up the best year we ever had. And I'm sitting there thinking like 2021 is going to be so great. So this is the January 2021 issue. It's like 2021 is going to be amazing. I'm going to kill it. Everything's turning up, Gary. 2021 USA. And then the world ended. Everybody's business got killed. Everything bad happened all at once. And so, just the sort of like, just when you get a little too big for your britches, there are plenty. I'm not saying that's why the pandemic happened, but one of the byproducts was we got taken down a peg and had to basically rebuild our business from scratch, like most of us. And so I love this image so much. If somebody said, what's your favorite portrait you've ever taken? It's Live Heart is her name. And this is her portrait, my collaboration with her on this. And I think I don't see that changing unless I do something really spectacular. I just love the simplicity of it, the timelessness, and I love the person in the photo.
Yeah. So there's your 10. What a wide breadth of work, and what a diverse range of images. Something there for everyone to enjoy. Gary Hughes, jack of all trade, master of all of them as well.
Master of none. Lucky man, indeed. That's how I'd put it. I always had a willingness to embarrass myself, a willingness to do what I'm scared of. I like. I think you're either afraid to fail or you're afraid to miss out, and I'm much more afraid to miss out than I am to fail. And that's always been my advantage. I just run headfirst into everything, and it turns out how it turns out. So, but I'd be more terrified to not try than to try. And that doesn't mean that makes me better. It just means my fear operates differently. And so fear of failure doesn't concern me at all. It's just how my brain is wired. And so I feel like that for those of you that are afraid of failure, I know I can't rewire your brain, but I can tell you there's absolutely almost nothing in this life, in this career as a photographer that's worth being afraid of. Say yes more often. And even if it doesn't turn out well, sometimes it does.
Gary, where can people find you online?
Okay, my website, if you want to see my studio site, it's hughesfioretti.com. If you get anywhere near spelling that correctly, you'll find it. My YouTube channel is at Gary Hughes Official. My Instagram is at Gary Hughes Official. And I don't know, don't friend me on LinkedIn. I don't care about you on LinkedIn. And also, I launched a software platform about 7 months ago called Headshot Tools. If your photographer shoots headshots for teams or at events like me, it is a one-stop shop to solve all of your organizational and delivery problems. So check that out, headshottools.com. And I guess that's it. Yeah, all right. And if you happen to be watching this before January 2024, I'll be speaking Imaging USA, and then in June at Click Live. In the UK,
live in the UK, near your home in Wolverhampton.
That's right, Coventry. They say you can't call it Coventry. It's Coventry.
Yes, because it's Coventry. That's how it's spelled.
Coventry.
What's Coventry?
I don't know.
Coventry.
Yeah, but if you say it with an English accent and you're American, you sound like a douchebag trying too hard. It's like trying to pronounce here. The main second language in the United States is Spanish, and if you guys, it's like, my buddies and I for my bachelor party went down to Mexico, and it was a really good time. Like, don't I sound like a complete and total bellend when I do that? Like, come on, like, just an absolute moron.
Just an absolute moron. Gary Hughes, thank you very much indeed.
It's a great sign off.